President Trump's sweeping federal budget cuts could literally mean the difference between life and death. The Trump administration has so far terminated more than $1 billion in grants for the National Institutes of Health. Now, the NIH is responsible for more than 80% of the world's investment in biomedical research. 80% of the world's investment. Funding from the NIH is responsible for countless medical breakthroughs, from cancer to diabetes to strokes to studies to prevent the next pandemic, to find treatments for Alzheimer's and dementia. Trump administration is targeting projects that it determines have any connection to diversity, equity, or gender identity. This doesn't make any sense. This goes way beyond DEI. This affects everyone. We're talking about research on maternal health outcomes, cervical cancer, child suicide, HIV prevention, stillbirths, and more. And most studies on illness and disease that disproportionately affect certain populations, like women or people of color, will come to an end. And because understanding high-risk groups is essential to improving public health across the board, studies that you don't even know we needed are now at risk. If I told you the Trump administration targeted at least 6 projects studying the effect of hormones in rodents, you'd probably say, so what? Well, those rodent studies were on track to find cures for cancer, cardiovascular disease, and asthma in humans. But the Trump administration canceled those projects, calling them, quote, egregious examples of waste, fraud, and abuse, and transgender experiments, whatever that means. Another example, the Trump administration targeted a Columbia University lab, which, according to ProPublica, was tracking nearly 1,000 women diagnosed with cervical cancer. Now those labs are being forced to shut down. As a scientist or a researcher, getting your hands on NIH funding is no small feat. Scientists spend years assembling the grant applications. Only 20% get approved, and until now, only 5 NIH grants out of tens of thousands have ever been revoked. That was before Trump returned to office. Now, not only is critical research being tossed aside, but the future of science itself is being gutted. Experts are warning of a lost generation of scientists, a looming brain drain, as promising young researchers look abroad for opportunities. Now, you might ask, can't private donors or pharma companies step in? Not really. Private labs and drug companies chase shorter-term financial returns. In fact, they often take things that were discovered in NIH research and commercialize them. They tend not to finance 20 or 30-year exploratory basic research projects like the NIH does. Journalist and blood cancer survivor John Harwood puts it like this, quote, for any individual company, basic research doesn't yield enough short-term profit, end quote. He's right. John Harwood, he's my friend. John Harwood's own life was saved by cancer treatments rooted in research that began after World War I. That kind of science only happens through public investment, sustained government-funded research. Without it, future breakthroughs, whether for cancer, HIV, Alzheimer's, the next pandemic, they simply may never arrive. John joins me now. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He's the author of Zateo's The Stakes column. John, I didn't think you and I were going to talk about your cancer on TV ever, but this is personal to you. By the way, it's personal to everybody, right? Everybody knows somebody with heart disease, cancer, diabetes, who got COVID, who got a vaccine for COVID. This is all of us.
Ali, the way that I've benefited from this research has a long tail to it. It started, as you indicated, after World War I, when people studying the effects of mustard gas on soldiers discovered chemotherapy, that derivatives of that mustard gas could kill cancer cells. And that continued past World War II, and it's continued up to the present day. And this is why, this research is why I'm able to sit here with a house full of kids and grandkids and celebrate Father's Day. I'm grateful for that. Also grateful that Jack, Hannah, Flynn, Patrick, and Ida are all being quiet while I do this hit.
John, to your point, there are things that NIH scientists are working on today that you and I don't know about, have no need to know about, but may affect us 20 years from now, 25 years from now, either in a pandemic or some illness we develop that is unusual to us because we didn't think we were going to develop it, but someone's been working on a cure. The same thing happened with COVID, right? Everybody thinks it was all developed in a year, but there were people working on COVID at the University of Pennsylvania for 40 years.
It's a slow, iterative process that goes a few yards at a time. So they started doing bone marrow transplants in the 1960s. But bone marrow transplants were very limited at that time. If you're over 40, you couldn't get one because the mortality rates were too high. They figured it wasn't a good enough bet to transplant those people. You needed a perfect match of immune systems in order to get a transplant. That very much narrowed the range of donors to siblings, basically. It was especially hard for African Americans and Hispanics to get blood donations, or marrow donations. But then there was a breakthrough with a chemotherapy drug that they figured out that if they applied it right after the transplant, it could tame the rejection impulse your body has. And that meant you could have half-match donors, meaning kids, including my daughter, who was 30 years old. She could be a donor for me without the risk of, or an inordinate risk of rejection. And that's the kind of slow grinding process.
Right.
That was discovered in 2008. And so, in 2028, something's going to be discovered, 2038. But what the Trump administration is doing is they're cutting, they want to cut NIH budget by 40%, the National Cancer Institute budget by 40%. With respect to the Cancer Institute, that's $2.7 billion in 2026. The Trump tax cut would give 18 times that much money to the top 0.1% of incomes in the United States. And so that's the priorities that they have expressed. And I think it's important that all of us who have benefited from this research make clear what's at stake.
Let's talk about return on investment. I'll use GLP-1s as an example, right? These are one of the biggest killers of people in America is diabetes. Chronic obesity is a contributor to that. GLP-1s are, for some people, the only way they can lose this excess weight that will save them from diabetes. The remarkable return on that investment, again, this was NIH research on the saliva of the Gila monster that people mocked at the time. The money that we will all get back, the taxpayer money that went into that research that will now be returned because we are not going to spend all that extra money on saving people from dying from diabetes over time, there's kind of nothing like it.
It's return on investment for the entire country. Yes, the drug companies that make these weight loss drugs are also going to make a lot of money. But think about the citizenry of the United States and the benefits that you just mentioned. Same thing with things like Alzheimer's. There's very promising research going on Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't move quickly. And sometimes if you describe what the research is, it sounds funny to the average person. And they're like, why are we spending money on that? But our future generations are going to reap the benefit, and maybe even some people in the current generation.
John, thank you. I'm glad that research has kept you with us and kept our friendship going. John Harwood is the author of Zateo's The Stakes column.